From the News Channel 5 Network, this is Inside Politics.
Hello, everyone. I'm News Channel 5's political analyst, Pat Nolan. Welcome to Inside Politics. Our guest today on Inside Politics is Bill Haltom. He's a Memphis attorney and the author of a great new book entitled The Other Fellow May Be Right, The Civility of Howard Baker. Mr. Haltom, thank you for coming on the show.
Happy to be here, Pat.
Senator Baker just passed a few months ago. The timing of this book probably couldn't be better in terms of people being interested in looking back on his career. But you've been thinking about this one for a while. I found an article you wrote 5 years ago in 2009 in the Tennessee Bar Association magazine that had almost the exact same title.
It had the exact same title, Pat. I moderated a program a few years back, a wonderful program of powerful Tennessee lawyers. Jim Neal was on the program, Senator Baker was on the program, and he made a comment during I was leading the discussion. He made a comment about the fact that he, as a lawyer and a politician, he had lived his life in contentious arenas. But he said, you know, I always have tried to remember what my father taught me when I was a boy. He said, Howard, always remember the other fellow may be right. And I wrote an article about that comment and about his civility, and that led to collecting more stories about how he did that in his life in Washington and how he brought people together.
Your family, members of your family, have a relationship with Senator Baker for a long time. They urged you for a number of years to do this. What took you so long?
well, you know, I'm not a professional. I'm not a journalist. I'm not a scholar. I'm a lawyer with the Lewis Thomason firm, and I just enjoy sharing stories and telling stories. And I've written columns for the Memphis newspaper. I've written a lot of columns over the years, but I never really thought that much about writing an entire book about Senator Baker. But the book actually is a collection of the stories about his unique leadership style that unfortunately I think may have gone out of style now.
You worked on the book and spoke with the senator and lots of members of the family and close friends. You finished it literally just days before he passed away.
I did. It was a real joy. I spent time in Huntsville with Senator Baker and his marvelous wife, Senator Nancy Kesselbaum Baker. You know, there's only been two couples in the history of the United States Senate to marry, Howard Baker and Nancy Kesselbaum, and Bob and Liddy Dole. And I went to Washington, interviewed all these wonderful people, Democrats and Republicans that worked with him over the years, and from that collected some stories about his approach. He was called the Great Conciliator because he was able to bring Democrats and Republicans together, and actually in stark contrast to kind of the current political environment.
Now, you maintain in your book that Senator Baker, in his public life as senator, as later as White House Chief of Staff and ambassador to Japan, represented a level of stability in our politics and in our culture that you say, and I'll quote here, is going the way of the dinosaur. Why is that happening?
You know, I don't know. Part of it is, of course, our entire culture is not as civil as it used to be. I think in Washington, one of the things that's happened is both parties have become much more ideological. When Senator Baker had a great line once. He said, you know, people say that I was a leader. He said, but frankly, when I was in the Senate, people were willing to follow as well. But, you know, when Senator Baker was in the Senate, the Democrats had conservatives as well as liberals. The Republicans had conservatives. But they had liberal senators like Mark Hatfield of Oregon and Charles Percy of Illinois. So they really had to do more bipartisan coalitions in those days to get things done. But I also think you just can't take away from the leadership style of Howard Baker, who sought to bring people together.
Now, you talk about Senator Baker's style as not just being civil, but you call it strategic civility.
Yeah, because, and the reason, Pat, I appreciate you mentioning that, because the reason I say that is now the word civility is almost thought of as weakness, that you're just getting pushed around. The old Leo DeRocher line, you know, nice guys finish last. Howard Baker's civility wasn't just about being a nice guy. He wanted to accomplish things. He had very strong principles. He was a very strong conservative, even though he was moderate by many of the current standards. But his style was to reach out and bring people together, not just to be a nice guy. And as far as being pushed around, here's a man who who asked the pertinent questions during the Watergate investigation. Here was a man who supported President Carter on the Panama Canal Treaty in
cost him dearly politically.
and a lot of people believe it may have cost him the presidency in the 1980 campaign to President Reagan. So he dealt with very difficult issues, and it wasn't that he was just pushed around. He had strategic civility to get things accomplished.
Now, you said that Senator Baker had a way of being able to bring adversaries or people on the other sides of issues together, and somehow together they could find common ground. Sometimes that was a surprise to the people on both sides. Tell that story about Lowell Weicker and Jesse Helms.
Lowell Weicker was, of course, one of the old liberal Republican senators. Later became an independent, and of course Jesse Helms was as conservative a Republican senator as you could find. And Senator Baker would bring, when he was leader, would bring these senators into his office. They would sit around what was called the old mahogany desk, where his father-in-law Everett Dirksen had worked over the years. Probably put together the compromises that led to the Civil Rights Act of 1964. So somehow Senator Baker had convinced both Lowell Weicker and Jesse Helms to support the same idea, or the same bill. And as they walked out, Lowell Weicker looked at Jesse Helms and he said, "I don't know what just happened. You know, one of us is wrong." But so they were both marveled at the fact that they actually came together thanks to Howard Baker.
Now, the people who made these agreements with him or came together under his leadership were surprised. Was the senator ever surprised that he was able to bring these people together?
I don't know. You know, his father, Howard Baker Sr., was a wonderful role model in that regard. And Howard Baker grew up watching his father in Huntsville as a lawyer, later as a congressman. You know, he wasn't just in court. He put together the first electrical co-op there in the city. Howard Baker just followed in the footsteps of his father and saw what his father did. And also, I think if you had the privilege to meet Senator Baker, this was just the kind of person he was. He was in politics, yet he never demonized the other side. He never said, even though he was had strong convictions, he never said, "Look, I'm the only one who knows the right way on this," and worked together with not only his Republican colleagues, but worked together with his Democratic colleagues as well.
Okay, let's take a break. We're talking with William Haltom. He's a Memphis attorney. He also has written a great new book called "The Other Fellow May Be Right: The Civility of Howard Baker." Back to continue our conversation all about the book after this break.